hour to discuss the urgent topic of immigration reform. Last week, I had the opportunity and privilege of visiting the U.S.-Mexico border and bear witness to the carceral system that undergirds our immigration policy and practices. I gained a firsthand understanding of how our federal policies impact the conditions at the border. While there, I visited a Catholic charity shelter that centered its work around caring for newly arrived asylum seekers. This shelter operates on a shoestring budget and relies on FEMA to retroactively reimburse spending for essentials like food, a funding process that is never certain. And most of the workers there were volunteers from across the country. While their facilities lacked resources, it was abundant with care. I then saw inside a well-funded Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, facilities, where law enforcement had put over 10 men who had not been tested for COVID together in one small cell, sleeping on the concrete floor, even when other cells were sitting empty. For context, the current yearly funding level for CBP is more than $15 billion. In New York's 16th Congressional District, which I represent, a third of my constituents are born outside of the United States. I represent thousands of undocumented constituents, refugees, and immigrants living and working in the Bronx and Westchester, who have to navigate our immigration system on a regular basis with fear from ICE agents. In our home state of New York is Ellis Island, which reads, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." The U.S.-Mexico border is the new Ellis Island, yet these newcomers are a darker hue than those who came to Ellis Island with welcome arms are met with punishment, walls, and harm. We send our tired and our poor to prison-like detention centers without proper medical care, little food and produce, and re-traumatizing experience for those who already made a scary and life-threatening trek across the border. I heard stories of mothers traveling with their 1-month-old babies across the river, carrying their babies on their heads as they waded through the waters. Now imagine the level of desperation in your home country where you would risk the life of yourself and your 1-month-old baby to come to this country with no guarantee that you are going to be able to remain here. We need to reimagine and redesign our immigration system and support. We need the support we provide to our immigration neighbors. If we want to live up to the ideals of this country, our system must be rooted in care and inclusion, not militarization, surveillance, detention, and forced deportation. As a black man in America and as black people in America, we've been experiencing mass incarceration since the end of slavery. And our brothers and sisters coming in through the Mexico border to the U.S. are experiencing mass incarceration and mass deportation under the hands of CBP. The differences in funding and capacity at the Catholic charity shelter, which heavily relies on donations, versus the CBP facility, was startling and disheartening. The vast majority of CBP apprehensions, listen to this, the vast majority of CBP apprehensions, over 90%, were determined by Border Patrol to not be criminals. Over 90%. Border Patrol told me this. Yet the vast majority of our annual funding to this region goes to law enforcement. We need a fundamental shift in our priorities to move away from funding detention and militarization at our border. This is especially true given how past U.S. policies, such as the U.S. occupation of Nicaragua in 1912 and other Latin American countries, and our historic empowerment of corrupt governments have contributed to instability, violence, and economic oppression, all of which force people to flee their home countries to seek asylum here. Yes, our immigration policy is connected to our foreign policy and connected to our capitalism. We have stolen land and resources from foreign countries and caused their political and economic systems to be disrupted and taken over by violence. The guns that get to many of these countries come from here. So we have caused this harm and disruption, yet we won't allow those who are looking for peace to flee into our country. We also need to create a pathway to citizenship for all of the 11.4 million undocumented immigrants as part of the next reconciliation package. The young adults who I met with in Laredo, Texas, whose family members have been deported, deserve a pathway to citizenship. And by the way, once CBP, which seem to be the hunters in this situation, detain someone and they need long-term detention, they pass them over to the ICE agents. And then the ICE agents put them in detention, and they're so isolated, they can't receive calls from family and friends. They can't receive letters. They can't receive visits. And finally, when someone finds a way to make a connection with the detention center, the person who was in the detention center is lost, often never to be found. The young adults who I met with in Laredo, whose family members have been deported, deserve a pathway to citizenship. The high schoolers in my district who fear that they won't be able to file for DACA status to stay in our country for college deserve a pathway to citizenship. From Laredo, Texas, to the Bronx, to Westchester, to St. Louis, Missouri, there are millions of people who should be able to stay in this country and continue to help our communities thrive. We have the power to provide stability and a sense of belonging to our immigrant communities, this Congress, and we cannot wait any longer. And I'll end with this. During the last administration, there was so much fear instilled in our immigrant families and communities that one student in the Bronx thought that her mom was deported from home, but the mom actually ran away so she wouldn't be deported. But because the student thought that the mother was deported, the student fell into a deep depression and committed suicide because she thought her mother was taken from her. This is what we're dealing with when it comes to our immigration policy. It is inhumane and it is evil. And our immigrants make us a stronger nation, not a weaker one. It's time for a 21st century Marshall Plan to help rebuild Central and South America. But those who come in here should be welcomed with open arms as they are just seeking peace and safety and care and security. And if we are as a nation to live up to the ideals of our democracy and our Constitution, we must welcome them with open arms and with love so that we can build a better nation back better. Thank you so much, Madam Congresswoman Teresa Leger Fernandez, and I yield back.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Representative Bowman. And thank you for going to the border, because it is only when we go to the border, but go to the border not with the intent to create a wedge issue, but with an intent to listen and with intent to open our arms that we really see what's going on. And the seeking of refuge, I went to the border with actually a bipartisan delegation. Surprise, it was wonderful, right? It was a bipartisan delegation. And it struck me, meeting with those young children who were alone. It struck me that the seeking of refuge and sending your child alone to a place that you believe is safe is as old as the Bible itself. Remember, Moses' mother put her child in a basket and sent him down the Nile because that was the way to save his life. when we think of that, let's remember the tears and the pain in the heart of every parent who sets out on that journey to seek asylum. And let's remember that it is the law of this land, it is the law of the United States and of the world to allow asylum and to grant asylum when you fear for your lives. And what we have now is a broken system. Trump took a sledgehammer to it, but we must demand that it be put back together. So thank you for sharing your thoughts with the nation today. I would now like to yield to the